Today I will be running down a 2018 drama thriller film titled 10 by 10. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead of this video, so chill out and enjoy it as I narrate it for you. The movie opens up when Kathy Newlin walks to her flower shop to carry out her business. As part of her daily routine, Kathy eats breakfast at the diner across the street and later goes to her yoga class. But she has no idea that an mystified man named Lewis is following her. Once he's sure that no one is keeping an eye on him, he checks out Kathy's car before retrieving his gun and several retraining materials from the trunk and covering them with a newspaper. Kathy finishes her class and goes to the changing rooms, where she meets another woman who asks her some techniques on how to cheat on her husband. Kathy seems not interested in this kind of conversation and walks outside to the parking lot, ready to go home, but before entering her vehicle, Lewis jumps and suddenly covers her face with a plastic bag to suffocate her. Kathy tries to break free by headbutting the maniac, and as soon as she removes the plastic cover, she screams for help. Unfortunately, the man who's nearby is listening to his headphones and doesn't hear anything. Lewis threatens to kill Kathy if she continues with her noise. He then covers her mouth with tape and restrains her hands and legs with cable ties. The maniac leaves Kathy on the floor, then walks back to relocate his vehicle where he left it. Lewis carries Kathy up and locks her in his trunk before driving to an unknown destination. At the traffic signal, a police vehicle pulls up beside him, but Lewis keeps his cool and doesn't look suspicious of anything. Lewis takes Kathy to his remote residence. He drags her into the house and locks her inside a padded 10 by 10 room, hidden just behind the fake wall. After preparing some food and removing Kathy's bags from the vehicle, Lewis checks on Kathy again. He tells her that she's locked inside soundproof walls, so there's no point in yelling for help. He tells her he'll take off the tape so she can tell him her name, and Kathy also nods in agreement. Lewis removes the tape, but she only starts screaming again. With that, Lewis locks her inside once more and turns off the light. He checks his computer to make sure that everything in the room is recorded. Later, Lewis cleans Kathy's bloodstains on his floor as Kathy manages to sit down and tries to find a way out of the room by kicking the padded wall, to no avail. So she decides to try something else when she notices the room has a vent. Kathy screams for help, but still nobody hears her since the house is in a remote area. In the living room, Lewis loads his gun while listening to an old news clip about a case being revisited. Evidence of 3 deaths that weren't natural surfaced. Outrageously, Lewis goes back to check on Kathy once more. She begs him not to touch her and offers him the 50 grand she has in savings, but Lewis declines her offer, saying it is a lot of money for someone in the line of business. He tells her straightforward that he doesn't want her money. Louis then takes out his gun and asks her about the news he has been watching, but Kathy ignores him and tells him that the cops will find her car, which will lead them to his house. She then promises not to say a word about him if he lets her go. But Lewis only demands that she tell him her real name when Kathy says her name is Kathy Nolan. Lewis gets disappointed, shuts the door and goes back to the living room. Lewis looks through Kathy's backpack but finds nothing of value to him, so he returns to watching the news. According to the reporter, there was insufficient evidence to support the unnatural deaths of the 3 people. Thus, the case was once again closed. Kathy painfully manages to bring her bound hands in front, and when Lewis enters the cellar, she hits him in the face and pushes him to the ground. Kathy takes the vase from the table and smashes it against him. She then drags herself to the table and uses the phone to call for help, but Lewis shows up in time and shoots it. Kathy feels cornered, and then she begs him not to kill her, but as soon as Lewis steps closer to her, she knocks him unconscious on the ground for a moment. Kathy hurries into the kitchen, where she finds her mobile, but there is no service. Then she checks the kitchen counter to get the knife and manages to cut the cable tie binding her ankles before trying to escape the house. Sadly, all the doors are locked. Kathy bangs on the door and screams for help. Lewis finally regains consciousness and asks her where she thinks she's going. With the knife still in her hand to protect herself, Kathy warns him to stay back and asks him how he knows what she does for a living. However, Lewis replies by asking her to join him at the dining table so she can tell him the things he wants to know. He then asks her if they could start again since he just wants to know her a little bit more. Kathy moves towards the table, asking who he is and if there are other women in the house aside from her. Unbothered, Lewis retorts that he can easily beat her with his gun before asking her to sit down. When Kathy sits down, he offers her some food, but she refuses to eat. Lewis tells her that she's smart, and she's probably figured out what he truly is. Once he asks her name once more, Kathy repeats the same answer. Lewis gets upset about it, causing him to throw his plate at her face and quickly draw his gun at her. Kathy knocks it off his hands and tries to fight back, but Lewis pushes her against the counter to drop the knife. Kathy bravely bites his shoulder before putting him in a chokehold, but she is too weak to leave him unconscious. So Kathy then tries to escape from him, but Lewis knocks her out with a punch and takes her back to the 10 by 10 cellar. Lewis finds his helper, Alondra, waiting for him when he gets back to the kitchen. The housekeeper gets confused upon seeing the mess in the house. However, Lewis informs her that he doesn't need her for the day. When Alondra notices that Lewis is bleeding, she gets assured that he's okay and that she should just leave because he is on one of those days. Alondra tries to persist despite her boss's dismissal and insistence that she is not needed. Dropping the subject, the housekeeper says she'll come back the following day with his daughter, who's at the sleepover. Lewis takes a shower and tends to his wound while Kathy takes out her phone, which she secretly hid in her pocket to call the police, but again, there is no signal in the compartment. She begins attempting to remove the shard from the floor as soon as she notices a crack in one of the tiles. Lewis pays Kathy another visit with his gun in hand. He begins interrogating her about her private life, her parents, the number of siblings, and her connection to the church. Kathy then answers everything. Lewis, however, isn't satisfied with what she has just said. So he informs her that he has been following her for several months and is aware that everything she just told him is a mixed bag of lies. Then he keeps pressing her to provide accurate facts. Kathy eventually recants her story when Lewis fires the bullet at the wall. Natalie Anstey is her true name. She was raised with her twin sister, Kathy Newland, who committed suicide after their father, a football team doctor, left their mother in favor of a cheerleader. After Natalie's confession, Lewis says that she must be wondering why he took her hostage. He adds that he thinks she already figured out the answer to that question. As soon as the door closes, both Lewis and Kathy break down in tears. Later, Lewis returns to the living room to watch his family's recorded tapes. In the locked room, Natalie tries to remove the broken shard on the floor, but her efforts are fruitless. She then pulls out her phone again and eventually manages to get a signal near the vent and alerts the police that she's been kidnapped, but the weak signal ends the call. So she just hides it again in her pants. Once Lewis sees a mobile in the video, he learns that Kathy took the mobile from the bag. He then hastily goes back into the cellar with his gun. Lewis destroys the mobile as soon as he retrieves it from her jeans. After threatening to kill her because of her actions, he starts his second interrogation. Natalie admits to having worked at All Angels Hospital. He then questions her about the patients who died inexplicably under her care, including his wife. Natalie reminds him that all of the nurses were found not guilty after a trial. Natalie's explanation asserts that the only reason she left town was to start over since the trial destroyed her career. Lewis says he started doubting his wife's cause of death when he noticed that her wedding ring was missing. Yet his wife had never taken off her wedding ring, ever since they got married. It was unusual that she was intoxicated, and her body was flooded with substances. Lewis goes on to talk about another patient who mysteriously died of organ failure but had passed his medical insurance a month earlier. Maintaining her innocence, Natalie insists that the court found no negligence with the hospital and that she's sorry for his loss. Because he knows she killed his wife, and he wants to know why. Lewis then adds that if he doesn't get a good explanation as to how his wife died, she's going to die as well. When Lewis aims his gun at Natalie's head, she begs him not to kill her, promising she'll tell him everything he wants to know. Natalie narrates to him her childhood, saying that she and her sister were raised in a religious environment. Kathy one day learned that her best friend at school was having an affair with their father. But when their mother challenged him about it, he abandoned them, leaving them ashamed in the village. The town folks deliberately avoided them as a result of their father's transgressions. This ultimately caused her twin sister to take her own life. Natalie discovered her body the next day dangling from the drafters in the barn. Because of her lifelong commitment to helping others, Natalie says her patients always felt comfortable confiding in her with their secrets. She opens up to him about his wife's intoxication. His wife collapsed in the motel, and then the paramedics were dispatched, but his wife wasn't wearing her wedding ring because she was sleeping with another man. Lewis unable to accept the truth, so he orders Natalie to keep quiet, but she continues to say that not a single ID was found on her when she was brought to the hospital. Natalie confesses to killing the 3 patients because she believed they were sinners. After learning of his wife's secret, Lewis leaves the cellar feeling uneasy. Lewis keeps rewinding the video of his wife as she cancels an incoming call and then realizes that Natalie might be telling the truth. Lewis breakdown shouts out in rage and then begins smashing items around the house. When Natalie finds a broken piece of her phone, she realizes she can use it as a tool to remove the tile from the floor. Lewis goes back into the padded room and tells Natalie that she did not have the right to kill his wife before he could speak with her. He then requests that she give herself in as well. But Natalie jabs the tile shard into his shoulder and then begins to kick him. Natalie runs through the kitchen searching for the gun, but instead she finds a knife on the counter, then she runs back to the compartment to get rid of him. Lewis attempts to lock her inside again, but he takes off after wrestling for a few minutes. Before grabbing his gun from the ground, Natalie emerges and kicks it out of his hand. They then engage in a physical fight. Natalie eventually subdues him and takes the gun from him. Just then, Alondra and his daughter show up. After shooting the housekeeper, Natalie apprehends his daughter as she tries to run to her father. Lewis tells Natalie that she doesn't have to turn herself in before promising her that he won't say a word to anyone if she doesn't hurt his daughter. Natalie points the gun at the girl's head as a refusal of his offer. She states that the police would still be able to track her mobile. Lewis then informs her that he has taped every word she has uttered ever since she stepped into the house. Natalie gets obstructed by this, and then the girl seizes the opportunity to bite Natalie and escape. Lewis smacks Natalie down to the ground and strangles her until she passes out. But after taking a few steps away, Natalie stands back on her feet. Lewis then shoots her and heads off to find his daughter hiding in the compartment. Father and daughter come back into the office to pick up the USB stick from the computer. Then Lewis rushes with his daughter into the garage after realizing Natalie is gone. Unaware that Natalie has been waiting for them with the gun. Lucky enough the weapon has no bullets in it. Lewis throws her over the car's hood, then Natalie strikes him with garden tools in retaliation to subdue him. Natalie puts a pitchfork in his chest with the purpose of killing him. To prevent the fork from piercing him, Lewis grabs hold of it, then pushes while holding his breath to hit Natalie until she falls back to the ground. She can't get away because the garage door collapses on top of her. Lewis hugs his daughter and apologizes while calling her his child. The police sirens are heard from a distance as the movie comes to an end. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more of my videos. Have a good day.